everyone, my name is Bethany Leonard. I currently teach family consumer science at Bradford, Arkansas, which is a fairly small town. I have always been aware of ICEV and I've always tried to use some of their components in my classes. But this last year with COVID, I really dove in and ICEV provided me the core components that I used throughout the entire year. With this, I was able to learn some of the ins and outs, things that worked, things that didn't, and some things I wanted to change. So I wanted to relay all of that to you guys, and so that hopefully y'all can have a better experience with ICEV, or y'all can learn something that y'all didn't know before. So I assume this is going to be a pretty fast and furious lesson or presentation. I'm going to try to go over how I use it, settings that I change to make it easier for me and my students. And at the end, I'm going to give you a link that takes you to a bunch of resources that I'm providing for you. And so let me know if you have any questions. I know there's supposed to be a 10-minute Q&A at the end of this. But if your question doesn't get asked or you think of it later, I will be providing my email so that you can have access to that. So I'm going to be using my family CSI class. This is the 7th and 8th grade, basically survey of the survey class. And it only lasts a semester, and it kind of goes through all of the components that the year-long facts class does, only in a semester. So it's kind of pretty quick and snappy. I'm also going to be using the positive relationships lesson on ICEV to kind of go through some of the components that I'm talking about. So let's head on over to ICEV. So this is my courses page. I haven't archived any of my courses yet. Excuse me. So I'm going to use this family CSI just because it's at the very top. So we're going to view that. This is my entire lessons unit for 18 weeks. We do move pretty quickly through this. So I'm going to head into here. And this is what the landing page of positive relationships look like. They always have the PowerPoint and all of that. The students just don't have these little buttons up here. So starting off with the presentation, there are two ways that I use the presentations. Each lesson is going to come with either a PowerPoint presentation or a video. And if it's a video, I just post it to Google Classroom and my virtual students watch it there. And then I play it all together, and my in-person students view the video all together. Presentations are a little different than the PowerPoints. One way is they get printed. I have several students that need the PowerPoint and the notes printed for them per their paperwork. So they get printed. And the way they do that is you can go into instructional materials and you can just click this link here, download the PowerPoint. It'll pop up down here and you can print it out like normal. The second is posted to Google Classroom, and you have two different options on how you do that. You can just use this link right here, and you can use this link and it'll post it right to Google Classroom. You can name it whatever you want. Done. I tend to not do that. And the reason I don't do that is because I manually post mine. Since I'm already downloading them because I have to print them for some of my students, I go ahead and I upload them into Google Slides and I adjust them to a Google slide. The reason I do this is because we're a Google school. So my students are more familiar with the Google Suite than they are Microsoft Suite, except for in the business building. But this allows me to present the PowerPoint a little bit smoother. I have an Apple TV, an iPad, and an Apple Pencil. And so that allows me to mirror to my Apple TV. And I can present this PowerPoint from an iPad and a pencil in my hand, walking around the classroom, being wherever I need to be. I'm also able to underline, circle, further clarify, work out any math problems if we're in a math unit, and do any of this from anywhere next to anybody. So not only does it help with discipline, it also helps with that clarification, which is wonderful. I've realized this really, really helps out my students with special needs, especially some of those that are low reading level. It lets them be able to recognize the word, see that word, hear it come out of my mouth, and then they either write it down or retype it in their notes. So it kind of helps them get some repetition with that word. It helps them follow along a little bit better, helps everybody follow along a little bit better, because if you're underlining things, then they're going to be tracking with you a little bit better. And it tends to keep them all focused. Another thing that I really enjoy about this is it gives me the ability to record my voice and put it onto each slide. So if I, and so when I re-upload this on Google Classroom at the end of the day or before, because some of these already have it, if I have any virtual students or any students that are at home that learn better auditorily or need my verbal readings for them because their reading level is not high enough, this helps bridge that gap, and it helps them still get that information without having to struggle for it. So that's kind of how I use these presentations. So the next thing would be notes. And on here for instructional, you can print out student notes or teacher's notes, depending on which ones your student needs. If you click student notes, it's going to take you over here to this other page. You can click download. Oh, my face is in the way. You can click download or print, either way you need to do. And then, oops, what did I just do there? I don't want to do that. Okay. You can do the same with teacher's notes. Any of these assignments, activities, they can all be done that way. So the notes, there are a couple different types. There are the ones that I just showed you where you would print them out and make them paper copies. Or there's those same exact notes are already integrated down in here, and they would just click on them and they look like this. They've got two options and they follow right along with the PowerPoint. This is a really great option for virtual students or students that are going to work at their own pace and try to get things done quicker. But I oftentimes find my students in class in person rush through this. Since there's only two options, they go through and they will just click the options and click submit and enter. So they don't always get the right answers, and then they don't always go back and redo it. I actually had a student who barely passed my course this year. He ended up with like, I think a 60, not a 61, something like that. And it wasn't because they weren't smart, they couldn't do it. It was because they would go in and they would guess on all of the notes and all of the quiz. And so instead of having, 80s and 90s and hundreds on the notes, he would have 10s and 20s on the notes. And he did all of his work. He did every last bit of it. He didn't have one thing missing. But since they were all so low in grades, it really brought his overall grade way down. I think the semester test is what really saved it. But that was just an issue that I had. Once I realized that this was becoming an issue, I decided to start downloading these notes like this. And when you download them like this, you can also convert them using Acrobat or Adobe. You can convert them into a Word document. So that it gives you a couple different options. You can give it to them just like this, and they can use Cami, and they can fill in these blanks and type into those blanks. Or you can convert it to a Word document and they can type into the Word document. I found that this allows for a little bit more recognition because they're typing the word instead of just clicking it. And it also slows them down because they can't just click one button and click recognition or development or behavior. They have to actually type that out. So this can also be printed out, and they can just do it with a pencil and paper. And so I have a couple of them that prefer it that way as well. But that's kind of how I view the notes. Some are really good for virtual, some are really good for in person. The notes on the computer, I think, are great and wonderful for virtual students, but I really like the printed or Word document ones for any students that are in class because they tend to rush through it, if not. Okay, so now we've got some activities and projects. So when you click on your instructional materials, it'll always have several activities or projects that can be used with, or that's intended to be used with the lesson. And I'm just going to open up a couple real quick. And I'm going to talk about these. So I don't want that one. Okay. So this is one of them that we can do. You can upload them directly to Google Classroom by just clicking the little, you have to have them visible, but then you can directly upload them to Google Classroom, clicking this link. But I found that this is the one area that I modify the most. If we look at this assignment, it wants you to write a 1 to 2 page paper. Okay. If we look at the next project, it wants you to list 10 reasons, list 10 rules, and discuss the impact. So that's more writing. If we look at this one, it wants you to create an advertisement for a best friend. This one's not horrible. I've used this one. I like this one. My students like this one. But in some of the longer, more in-depth lessons, I have found out that the assignments and the activities and the projects are very heavily based on writing. And for my 7th graders specifically, since I'm talking about my 7th grade class right now, the terms write papers, write essays, paragraphs, it kind of overwhelms them a little bit. They're still used to hearing, give me so many sentences, not give me 3 to 4 paragraphs. So I've realized that, and a lot of them use Microsoft Office terminology. And like I said before, we're Google school. So especially those 7th graders coming up to me for the first time in high school, they're not aware of Microsoft Office. They've only had their Chromebooks, the iPads, and Google Suite in the elementary school. So there's a lot, these assignments kind of overwhelm the younger students, in my opinion. So I have several of these. I've taken the basic concept or developed something that asks the same types of information, but in a worksheet format. And these are the ones that, after I realized they weren't doing very well with these first semester, I created a couple new ones. In the second semester, they preferred the worksheets over the ICEV assignments. So I've used several in class already. They went really well, but I'm working to add more of those for next year in my classroom. This is some of the things at the end that you're going to have access to, some of these worksheets. But this is kind of how I've got them to look. So it talks about families. You're going to define your families, and then you're going to match them with a family that's on TV that they've either seen or they look it up in class. So they're still learning about singular, nuclear, separated, blended, extended, and adopted families, but they're doing it in a way that's more familiar to them. And while it does include typing and writing, it doesn't seem like they're writing massive papers or paragraphs or essays, like some of the wording on ICEV says. Now, the other side of that is a lot of the ICEV activities and assignments and projects work really, really well for some of those upper level students. The students that aren't afraid of the word essay and or multiple paragraphs. my high-end or my higher level classes that are meant for my 11th and 12th graders, they use them and they have no problem with them. But this is specifically for some of my younger students, mostly like 7 through 9. I tend to use these types of worksheets with. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the quizzes. So the quizzes have areas where they can be printed if you want to print them, but they also have them where they're down here. And there's 2 types of quizzes. Excuse me. There's a 5-question quiz. These are like you would think any quiz, 5-question quiz is going to be. They're multiple choice. Oops, that's locked, so I can't view that. They're multiple choice. Gives them 1 question at a time, 5 questions. I tend to use these as exit tickets. You can either upload them to Google Classroom, like I do in the virtual student case, or in person. Now that we're going to be able to use paper again, next year I will either put it up on the board and they will answer it on paper and turn it in, or I will print them out and they will turn them in as they leave. I find this allows me to quickly look at how they're doing before I even look at the assignment for the day. I can see kind of what their understanding is, how they're faring, and it kind of helps me decide what I'm going to be doing the next day. And then the other one is a 10-question quiz. This is almost always denoted by a gold or a green star next to it. And this quiz is one of the last things I use. It's kind of like the end of the lesson assessment. They only get 1 shot at it, and it kind of just lets me see exactly where they are before we do the end of the unit project or test that I'll talk about in just a moment. So a new thing that popped up this year, which I thought was wonderful, was this course assessments. You can click on it and it can actually help you make tests. You can put a title in here. You can click however many lessons you want. So let's say I'm going to do this first little bit. And then we'll do test. So I'm going to go next. So this one's really neat because it allows you to either find items, which you can go through and it will show you all of the questions, activities, projects, vocab, everything from those lessons that you clicked into it. Or you can create an item and you get to pick from multiple choice, multiple response, true, false, choice matrix, matching, things like that. You get to do, you can click any of these, and then if you click one, it lets you type into it and it lets you create a test. This is wonderful. I haven't really used it much. The reason I plan to use this more in the upcoming year, but the reason I don't really use it very much is I'm a big proponent of end of unit projects instead of tests. They assess the same type of information, but with my hands-on students, it really helps them display their knowledge a little bit better. But I have some students that just can't stand the idea of doing a project. So the way I view it is I give the assignment or I give the project, let them have time to work on the project. And if it's not turned in by the time that it needs to be turned in, then they take a paper test or a test online. So that's kind of how I use the tests, and that's how I'll use the test creator. So this last little bit is going to be talking about setup and ease. This is going to be settings that are good for me and my students. I'm going to kind of bounce around just because I'm already on the landing page for one of them. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is hiding lessons. This helps my students stay on track, especially my younger 7th grades. 7th and 8th graders, they tend to get confused and start doing the wrong unit or the wrong lesson whenever whenever they're all open and visible to them. So you can look here where some of these say hidden from students, some of them say visible to students. That means that if a student was in this class, they couldn't see the family relationships and management course. They can only see the family life cycle. And this kind of keeps them on track, keeps them knowing what's going on that 9 weeks, and keeps them from trying to do work from before or after. So that really helps. So if we go back in here, like we have a couple lessons here. I always have show feedback and show correct answers on, just so they can see. I don't think it hurts for them to see the right answer and the wrong answer. One thing that helps here is the attempts. Whenever you, from a student's view, it shows summary when they complete it and gives them a summary over the activity if you have these lessons enabled. If not, or in addition to that, if you have assessment or attempts, it'll say 0 out of 2, 0 out of 1, or 1 out of 2 on the side there. And I've noticed that that kind of helps my students stay on track and realize which ones they have and haven't done. There was like a week or two that I forgot to put attempts on the assignments, and a lot of my students couldn't tell if they had done them or not, just by a quick glance. And so they really enjoy having those attempts and seeing that telltale like 0 out of 2, like you have nothing done on this. So that really helped them. Showing and hiding notes, you can click these buttons over here and it will make them visible. I tend to do this as we go, so I'll have them all turned off. And so on Monday, if we're going to do the introduction notes and quiz 1, I'll have them visible and it'll let me send it directly to Google Classroom. And then if Tuesday we're going to do it or do the next 2, we're going to open those up and then it'll let me send them to Google Classroom. And so that way they can only see what's ready at what time. Of course, if you have virtual students or if you're using this mostly for virtual students, you may just want to open it all up at once. So if you have an overachiever student that wants to get it all done on Monday, they can get all your assignments done on Monday and spend the rest of the week working on math or language, or however y'all school or platform prefers for that to be done. So this was really helpful. And the next ones were kind of most helpful for me. And another one that was kind of 50-50. So one that was really helpful for me was showing on grades report. So say we were kind of at the end of the week, and the end of the week ended up with us on Friday doing the introduction to positive relationships notes. Well, if I didn't want to, I tend to print out a copy of the grade reports every week at the end of the week or at the beginning of the week to show who's done what and how long, because I tend to leave mine up for about a week to give them plenty of time to work on it. So if I want to take all of these off the grade report, I can hide them from the grade report. And then that way, when I open the grade report up here, it's not going, or it will, I would open it, but it has all my students' names still in it. It will show me only these 2 assignments in the grade report for me to print. If I open up the master grade report, it will show me everything up to, or everything that I have shown on grade report. So I go through and I try to take every single thing off grade report at the beginning of the year and only add to it as we go. And then at the end of the 9 weeks, I will take everything back off and keep going. That way, at any given time, if I open up the master grade report, I'm only seeing what's currently in my grade book as a teacher, not everything for the entire year or the entire semester. It takes a little bit of time, but I found it's easier to click these buttons as I go through than it is me sitting there trying to delete them through the Excel spreadsheet. Or copying them over into a grade book. And then the next one, or the next 2, come from this little green Google Classroom button. So if you click on that, it's going to open up a screen where you can share anything with Google Classroom. You can rename it with the title. You can pick specific classes with the Google Classroom class. You can give instructions. I like this due date option. You can click in here and you can set a due date. So I tend to set mine for Sunday at midnight. However, if we go in here and we click Sunday, June 20th, it's going to automatically set it for 12 a.m. So that means this is going to shut down Sunday at 12 a.m., not Monday at 12 a.m. And so in order to change that, you have to scroll all the way through, and the earliest or the latest it goes is 11:30. So I like to leave mine at noon or midnight, but I just have to remind myself to always go a day past. Otherwise, I'm going to be locking it before my students have reached their deadline. And then you can also do, this is kind of closing on a certain day. After this due date, it goes gray and students can't access it anymore. This really helped my students kind of keep up with things, and they realized quickly like, oh, I didn't get that done, and they'll email me. It also lets me print out the, so on Monday at midnight, these all locked, meaning students couldn't do them past then. So then Monday, when I get to school, I can come in and I can print the grade reports, and I can see exactly who turned them in, who didn't, and then I can open it back up. And then that kind of shows me who gets late points and who doesn't. And then another thing that's interesting is the available date. So say I'm not going to be in the classroom, or if I just like sitting down Mondays before school and scheduling everything out, I can pick certain days that I want this to come active. So if I wanted it to come active June 16th, I can click June 16th, and at midnight, that'll be active, and it'll automatically share it to Google Classroom and post it through there. And so that's one of those things that I really enjoy about that. One of those things that I think is really easy and helpful through ICEB. Okay, so we're ending the presentation. So I want to provide y'all with a few bits of contact information or links. So this first link up here is to my link tree. This is going to provide you with a way to get to the resources that I'm providing. On this link tree, you'll find pacing guides for all the classes that I teach or have taught. Assignments and lesson lists corresponding with ICEB. So if you are going to be teaching life fitness and nutrition, if you're in Arkansas or something very similar in another state, and you don't know what courses or lessons to use of ICEB, you can check my list out and you can use that as a starting place, or you can copy it directly, whatever suits you. The pacing guide has all of the lessons, all of the notes, all of the assignments that I use, and how long I spend on each one. So that's good to see. It'll also take you to a place where you can download some of those assignments that I showed you that were in worksheet format, if you think your students would enjoy those or appreciate those. And it'll show you my walkthroughs. I will have a paper copy of this presentation that has been typed out available for you guys. And then I'm working on a modifications and accommodations sheet to where I write down the most common modifications and accommodations that my students have and how I meet those while using ICEB. So if that's something you struggle with, I would check that out. I also have my 2 emails here because you never know what's going to happen. You may have a question a year or 2 down the road, and you never know. So school email is bleonard@bradford.k12.ar.us, and my personal email, which is bethanywildfur@gmail.com. I check my email very often throughout the day. So let me know if you have any questions that don't get answered in the next little bit, or if you think of them afterwards, and I will try to help you as best as I can. So thank you guys for being with me. This was, not gonna lie, my first workshop presentation I've ever given. So I may be a little bit rough around the edges, but I'm getting there. And so I hope you've learned something or seen a way that I do and use ICEV that may help you out in the future or may help your students out. Like I said before, this is just the way that I've found that helped my students, and specifically my younger students, um, work better and more effectively in the classroom. So thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the Q&A.